Hey guys, in today's video I'm going to show you how to make this cute fanny pack, sling over bag, whatever you want to call it. I've been in love with crochet bags on Instagram lately, but I don't know how to crochet. I know how to knit. So I'm going to be working within my skill set here to create this bag. If you remember a few weeks ago, I cleaned up my yarn stash and shared with you that I have some yarn that I'm not too crazy about. So not only is the end result cute and functional, but I also was able to make some room in my already overflowing cupboard. We will be knitting 2 key pieces for this bag with these approximate dimensions. The number of stitches will vary depending on what yarn you decide to use. To make this bag, you will need approximately 3 skeins of contrasting Aran weight yarn, a pair of knitting needles, I use 6.5mm needles, and a crochet hook. Also optional, a pair of D-rings, which we'll get into later. To get started on the main panel, cast on stitches with both colors held together. Once you have the number of stitches for the desired dimensions, get ready to start working in moss stitch. To do moss stitch, if you're not familiar, it's basically a series of knits and purls that form this really textured fabric. So when you're doing 1x1 rib, you would knit whenever you see a knit stitch and purl whenever you see a purl stitch. With moss stitch, you would do the opposite. So whenever you see a purl stitch, instead of purling again, you would knit that stitch. And then alternatively for the next one, I'd bring my yarn to the front of my work and purl. And you continue to alternate like that. And as you can see, we have this nice texture that's forming. And the reason that I decided to go for moss stitch is that I thought, since most of these handbags are crocheted bags, I think crochet lends itself to have a little bit more structure, whereas in knitting it's much more flexible and stretchy. So in my opinion, this was probably the best fabric that I could do for a handbag because I think that it really tries to keep everything all together so it wouldn't stretch out too much. As you continue to work, working in moss stitch, you just continue, whenever you see the stitch, you do the opposite. So I see a purl stitch right here and I'm gonna purl, or every time you see a stitch, you do the opposite. So now I see a knit stitch here, so I'm going to knit. No. I see a purl stitch here, so I'm going to knit. And then I see a knit stitch here, so I'm going to purl. And I'll continue that pattern all the way until I reach the dimensions for this handbag. Just make sure that when you're doing your swatch, that there's not too much open space. So I still have it here. You can still see that it's a little stretchy. Hopefully the fabric is going to be tightly woven enough to keep it all in without sagging. Once you finish working the stitches for the main panel, cast off and weave in any loose ends. We're going to take this panel and fold it in half and sew up the side seams. This is my wrong side, so I'm going to sew right side facing together. And when I say sew, I'm actually going to crochet. So I have my crochet hook. It's 5.5mm. I am not very good at crochet, so I don't really know if that's a good size to use. This is honestly just one of the only crochet hooks that I have, so that's why I'm using it. And I am going to single crochet these 2 sides together. Right, so I think what I'm going to do, I looked at some tutorials, so I'm going to insert my crochet hook up through these 2, I think. And then wrap my yarn around and pull back through. And then I guess I'll just do another, I'm kind of just winging it as I go because again, I'm not very good at crochet. I don't know anything about crochet if I'm going to be completely honest with you. Crochet lovers, please shield your eyes. I tried my best with my subpar skills to single crochet up both sides of the folded panel to create a little pouch. I would really recommend looking up another video for this step. I'll link what I used in the description below. To keep any belongings I might store in this bag nice and secure, I picked up stitches along the back side of the panel to create a little flap. I worked enough rows so that the flap would stay down on its own, and then worked decreases just before casting off to create a gathered effect. For the strap, I measured the part of my body that I would wear this bag. Personally, I prefer to wear fanny packs across my chest, so I decided to make my strap just over 86 centimeters in length. I am working in a mix of stockinette stitch and then also doing moss stitch along the rib. So you can see I'm alternating knitting and purling on each row, or I'm knitting every row, so then I have garter stitch on the side. So I will knit one stitch and then knit across the row, and then the next row, once I get there, so I knit across the row, the first row, and then for the second row, I will knit the first stitch. So inserting my needle and knitting the first stitch, and then purling across the row until the last stitch, and knitting the last stitch as well. So that is what makes this nice garter stitch border, which I was kind of hoping would make it a little bit less likely to curl. Which, I mean, it's still kind of curling here. At least it's not so bad. So I'm thinking that it could at least just prevent it from curling too much. The last two pieces I made were two small stockinette straps to hold the main strap in place. I started assembling the bag by adding those small straps to the back. It was extremely difficult with the yarn that I'm using. I have to say I really don't recommend it. Sewing with this yarn is such a pain, but we got through it. And then the last piece of sewing that I did was on the end of the strap. I took the two D-rings that I found at my local craft store and wrapped the end of the strap around it and just sewed them into one side. And here's another look at the finished piece. In all, I'm so pleased with how this bag turned out. I think it's a nice weekend project that will also be great for spring and summer. I think I will go back and try and block the strap to see if that will make any difference with the current curling situation, and I'll also add some lining inside eventually to prevent the yarn ends from fraying. I hope you guys enjoyed this little tutorial. If you decide to make one of these bags, please tag me on Instagram so I can see and share your creations. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.